So, a very good morning, afternoon and evening to each and every one of you, and welcome to this special session of the UN Global Compact Academy. I hope you're all well and safe in these strange and indeed challenging times. The topic for today will be the imminent threats of disruptions to the global ocean supply chains. And I want to extend a warm welcome to our highly esteemed panelists, Guy Platten, Secretary General of the International Chamber of Shipping. Hello, Guy.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
So ICS is the association which is organizing 80% of the world merchant fleet, and I believe also a major lion's share of the offshore service vessels in the world. Also, a warm welcome to Heike Deggen, Safety Director of the International Maritime Organization, the UN specialized agency tasked with the responsibility of regulating both safety, training standards, environmental standards for the shipping industry. So welcome to you as well, Heike. And last but not least, Patrick Verhoeven of the International Association of Ports and Harbors, which is organizing, I believe, 180 ports and 140 ports-related activities around the world, and in 90 countries. Warm welcome to all of you. So let me just outline briefly the Renault show today. What we will do at the outset, I will give some introductory remarks to frame the topic. After that, we will go into the urgent and dire situation of the crews, which are currently stranded at sea, and see what can be done to alleviate this situation with crew changeovers, which is a major and urgent problem. After that, we will address the political follow-up of that, and then subsequently, towards the end of the session, we will address the more long-term perspectives. How do we build back better? How do we ensure improved resilience in the ocean-related supply chains in the post-pandemic world? We hope we have received a number of questions. I will invite all of you to submit questions if you have any, and then Michelle and Alyssa in New York will curate these questions, and I hope that through the discussion we will have answered most of them. If not, we'll see if we have time for some questions towards the end. We will for sure end before the top of the hour. So that is the Renault show. So just to give the context. Now, I think to set the context for the global ocean supply chains, I think that if we look at our planet from space, you know, this image of our planet, all of us will see the prominent role of the oceans. And I think that's a fitting illustration of the importance of the oceans in the global supply chains. Today, almost 90% of all international trade of goods is carried by vessels, carried by ships. This is the World Wide Web of logistics. It's carrying everything we need in our modern lives. It's carrying critical supplies of food and medical equipment in today's situation. It's also a precondition for the modern global economy and society as we know it, because it allows for the different parts of the world to produce what they're best at and exchange these goods on the world market in a efficient, reliable, and very cost-efficient manner. So these are the trade lanes. In addition, of course, the oceans, they are serve as a large global pool of resources, providing vital supplies of electricity, fuel, food, feeds, medicines, and minerals and metals. But today, we will address the shipping part of this. All the vessels which are serving the trade lanes and also the offshore installations. And in today's world, due to the pandemic, due to the national measures imposed by authorities to mitigate and contain the spread of the COVID-19, these trade lanes are now in imminent threats of delays, distortions, and disruptions. Just to give you an idea of the scope and the challenge and complexity that we are facing, as we are speaking now, there are 50,000 vessels with 1.2 million seafarers in operation all around the world. They're making some 4 million port calls every year, and every month there are 200,000 seafarers in transit for crew changeover. So that's a massive logistical system which is now threatened by the national measures imposed, by closed borders, by quarantines, by grounded airplanes. 90% of all international airplanes have now been grounded, and there are also local and additional restrictions and reduced capacities in ports. So that's a broad outline of the challenges that we're facing. This is, of course, not to say that the medical reasons for these measures should be disregarded. It's more to illuminate the consequences of this situation. And with that, I would like to just invite our speakers for some brief reflections on this general picture before we go to the urgent and critical situation of the seafarers. And maybe I could invite you first, guys, some reflections on the general picture from your vantage point.
Thank you very much, Ed. I think it's worth saying at the outset that the ships are delivering those vital supplies, the fuel, the medical equipment, all the things which is keeping the world going during this pandemic. And they've kept doing this throughout all the difficulties that Sturla has highlighted now. And that's a really important point. And they really are, in some ways, out of sight, out of mind. And that's something we're trying to address now, to raise the profile and the absolutely essential role they play. We still mentioned that 100,000 seafarers need to come off, 100,000 need to come on, 200,000 in total. But actually the situation is worse now, because for the last 2 months, 2.5 months, we've been unable to effect any crew changes at scale, which means the numbers now are 150,000 and growing every single week of people needing to be changed. And you ask, why do they need to come off the ships? Well, seafarers tend to do a tour of duty. They're a long way away from their family, their friends, their communities. And they're also working when they're on board a ship 7 days a week to keep the world supplied. So once they complete their tour of duty, in normal times, they're expected to be relieved and to then go home and for a relief crew, a fresh crew, to come out to take their place. But these are not normal times. And since probably, I'd say, the middle of March, when commercial traffic in particular has decreased by about 90%, when countries really started imposing their restrictions on travel, it's meant that we have been unable to effect those reliefs. So a lot of them are now at least 2 months over their time, and and we've still got a long way to go before we can even effect some changes. What are we doing about this, and why is that important? Because if we don't change them out, then you are inevitably going to get fatigue issues, you're going to have welfare issues and safety issues, and that's the last thing we want. We want the ships to keep on running, the supply chain to keep on going. And so we're lobbying governments, because this is a government political decision now, really allow these crew changes to take place. And we've developed a 12-point roadmap, an action plan, which in conjunction with the IMO, and Heike will almost certainly talk about that as well, which is a set of protocols to government in order to take this forward, in order to make them more comfortable about allowing crew changes to take place. So that gives you a little overview of the problem. 150,000 and growing. We need to take action now if we're not to have serious fatigue and safety issues coming down the track, which nobody wants.
Yeah, thank you so much, Guy. We'll dive into the crew changeover issue shortly. So thank you for those general comments on the situation. And from ship to shore, Patrick, how does this look from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the situation. Well, first of all, good morning or good afternoon in this case. Very glad to be here on this call. Situation in ports around the world is actually as diverse as the impact of the virus is, because we have, of course, countries that are now exiting from lockdown, but at the same time, there are still a lot of countries where the full impact is only starting, and we see that difference also in the impact on ports around the world, and that's also what we try to reflect in the assistance that we are providing our members since the outbreak of the crisis. So we're publishing, for instance, tomorrow the latest version of our own guidance document, and that will have both guidance on how to act during a lockdown, plus also guidance on how to get out of a lockdown. So we have to really deal with that diversity around the world. But the good news is, I think, from our part of the industry, is that so far, I think ports have really managed well to stay operational. Of course, there have been some strains on warehouse capacity, on interland connections, and also on the availability of the workforce. But overall, and this is the global picture, we do notice that most ports have managed to work in fairly what you can call normal conditions, which is, of course, very, very positive and remarkable. As I said, there are regional differences, of course. Some feel the impact more than others at this stage. And what remains also to be seen is what is going to be the actual economic impact. So far, the effect on traffic volumes in ports seems reasonable, with passenger traffic, of course, being the big exception, because that is to a large extent because cruise tourism has completely stopped. But most ports seem to expect that the big dip is still to come, that the effect, especially on container volumes, is still something to happen somewhere in this second quarter. But when exactly that will hit is a bit difficult to predict. But so far, things are reasonably okay on the cargo front. And maybe to conclude, as an organization, we're a membership organization, just like the Chamber of Shipping. Our focus is gradually shifting from the operational concerns of coping with the crisis, getting out of the crisis, to really how this crisis will change our industry. And we had a first public webinar on that topic yesterday, which was really well attended and came actually with some rather optimistic messages as to how we may have a great window of opportunity here as well to accelerate some of the things that we were working on before the crisis, like digitalisation, decarbonization. And I'll be glad to come back to that later on in the conversation. But that's more or less the picture for our industry and also where we stand as an organization.
So thank you very much, Patrick. I think I saw some statistics just yesterday which showed that container traffic is down by approximately 30%. And of course, we have to distinguish here between what is sort of a general drawdown of economic activities and what are the true impediments to trade and exchange of goods and changeover of people imposed by created by the national measures imposed. And we'll revert to the beyond the current pandemic, the post-pandemic situation later in the conversation. So thank you, Patrick. And then Heike, from the regulatory side, I want to just, by introducing you, I just want to say that contrary to what many people believe, the shipping industry is one of the most regulated industries that exist. And of course, at the top of that, and vested with that task and responsibility is your organization, the International Maritime Organization. So Heike, please.
Thank you, Sturla. Yes, we are the regulator of international shipping, and it being a global industry, it needs global regulation. And as you said, many people do not know that we are very highly regulated. That goes from safety, security of shipping, ship design, ship construction, ship equipment, stability, all kind of issues, cargo transport, to the prevention of pollution from by ships, atmospheric and marine pollution. So we are regulating all of this. These are, of course, now unprecedented times in shipping for all of us. And as you already mentioned, shipping transports 80%, more than 80%, some say 90% of all trade, global trade in the world. So it is a huge influence. And while cargo operations continue, like Patrick just pointed out, I'm not going to talk about the cruise industry here. The group that is most suffering in the current situation is the seafarers, and what we group as marine personnel, that includes fishing vessel personnel, offshore workers, all kinds of people that are connected directly with shipping. It's not only the crew change issue that was mentioned several times here. There are many other problems that goes from medical treatment, COVID or not, even normal medical treatment for seafarers on board ships is become almost impossible. It needs intervention at the highest level to get people from board, to get them to get hospital treatment. Visa issues, many people have now been so long on board that their visa have expired, their passports have expired. They need, lots of them need prescription medication, they cannot get hold of that. Shore leave issues, contracts, repatriation, the list is endless. And we in IMO, we try to do our best here in cooperation, close cooperation with the ICS and also IAPH, Patrick. We have formed a quite close-knit group out of necessity now, because there are so many issues to be addressed. And we in IMO, we have taken also the initiative to form a dedicated team that deals with problems, also down to an individual basis for seafarers that need help. Our Secretary General has intervened sometimes on the diplomatic level because he can approach governments directly. And we have been successful in some cases where it was worth doing all this just to get people out of a very difficult situation. And we think also, as was said already, that the current situation is not much longer sustainable for the safety and the well-being of crew on board ships. So that is really turning out to be a problem. Yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you, Sturla.
Yeah, thank you for those general introductory comments. I think that the picture as it's emerging now is that sort of there are, so far, there doesn't seem to be sort of that many disruptions in the supply of goods due to the COVID pandemic and the measures introduced. But this seems to be sort of rather a challenge of these supply chains eroding from inside, because the plight of the seafarers, those men and women, those more than 1 million people out on the sea today, they are enduring and suffering from uncertainty about the future. Some of them are long overdue in their contracts, and they are not able to be repatriated as they were expected to do. And now I believe also some of them are now nearing a violation of also international regulation for how long you can serve on board. So that is a segue to the next topic in our discussion and our conversation, the crew changeover. And maybe Guy, you could give us more on this issue. You have spearheaded the development of a 12-step plan and a set of protocols, which is now hopefully making some pathway ahead in this.
Thank you. So it's a tough focus for us, that, and also the issues that Heike quite rightly raised about medical provision and all sorts of other knock-on effects which our crews out there are having to put up with and having to experience. And and she said about a tight-knit team. We really have come together as an industry very closely to try and solve these problems. The 12-step plan, the protocols, was developed to give some assurance to governments that every single step of the seafarer's journey from leaving home to getting onto the ship would be covered. So from the checks, the temperature checks and medical things to do before they leave home, the days leading up to it, to their journey to the airport, to their flight, and then their journey the other side to get down to the port. And that has required close cooperation with organisations like Patrick's and with the IMO and others to develop it. And the IMO have then taken this forward and really issued it out to member states. So we're hopeful that it's going to help unlock, because, you know, aside from the medical issues which Heike is in, you know, getting these crew changes done is going to be so necessary if we're not going to have longer term disruption to the supply chain. I think, as we've all said, at the moment it's all working, but for how much longer before we encounter serious problems? So solving this crew change it's very important, and solving the other issues as well. So that's where we are. The good news is, I suppose, we're starting to see some chinks of light since these were issued, and some places are now starting to at least indicate that they are prepared to consider crew changes to take place. We know there's some trials going on next week which will give our crew some hope that things are going to change in the next month. And I think all our focus, all our energy now is to making that happen, and then to make sure that our supply chains remain intact, that ships carry on delivering them and picking up the cargoes and taking them to Patrick's ports as well, and then onwardly to the consumer.
So, Guy, maybe I could ask you to elaborate a bit how this is going to be done in practice. For instance, one aspect of it, with 90% of all airplanes grounded, do you expect to have sort of specially designated ports and airports? Do you envisage that you have to charter flights because all the regular flights they are grounded?
Well, it's interesting actually. I think there will be some charters. Certainly, one thing we perhaps been touched upon when we had the introductory remarks, and maybe I should have said, is the cruise industry has come to a complete halt for this pandemic. There's not a single cruise ship in the world sailing with any passengers, and what they're having to do actually is sail the ships to various countries to offload their crew. So there's cruise ships going to the Philippines as we speak to disembark. There's some seafarers there, and then the same in India and other places around the world. So I just wanted to that's been a real problem, repatriating hundreds of thousands of these crews to get back home. So that's where we envisage is a mixture of chartered and also commercially available aircraft. And what we're seeing now is, if you think this is an opportunity for the airline industry, so with 150,000 needing to be changed, that's a lot of planes, and that's a month. So we're seeing now that commercial airlines are seeing this perhaps as an opportunity to reinstigate some routes, and we're moving away from the concept of just hubs, because actually we want it to be open everywhere. But inevitably, there's going to be a few places where this is going to take place first. So we hear of potentially tentative plans to set up route between Manila and Amsterdam later on in May, which is good news, and the same pattern between Manila and Singapore and other places around the world. So that's where we're coming from. There's a market there for commercial airlines, and we've been working quite closely with the IATA, our aviation equivalent, to see what opportunities and how we could work together to make this happen. So in practice, we can do it, but what it does need is governments to embrace this 12-step, these protocols, to allow this to take place. And again, there's some good news there. A few countries really are taking it on board, and that's giving us a lot of hope as we move forward to this next phase in the next few weeks. I'm
happy to hear that. All rays of light in this dark situation are very welcome. And I think that what I guess you are aiming at in this situation is that this massive logistical challenge of changing over like 200,000 people every month, that is not something that you can do on a bilateral ad hoc basis. It needs sort of a structural, systemic approach and agreement politically at the global level. That is, I guess, the ambition of your work there. Good. Yeah, and that's exactly it. It is that collaborative approach at a really high level in order to make it happen. And that's why some of the work the UN Global Compact's done, the recommendations have been really helpful, because it just raises the issue. I always say the problem's very simple.
It's complex, and that's what we're trying to work to now.
Exactly. The scale and complexity of this is beyond sort of what you can deal with in a sector or within even a large global trade association like your own. You need sort of to bring this up to the highest global level, and this is also, of course, what we believe and hope that the UN Global Compact can contribute in this process. So we'll get back to the political follow-up, but thank you, Guy, and you, Patrick, from the shore side here. I guess you have also been involved in this work.
Yes, Tula, I think it's also for us. I think, as a port, you're sort of a crossing point between different modes of transport, with shipping, of course, being our raison d'être, if you like. But of course, we also have road, rail, and everything. So the well-functioning of all transport modes is essential, and that means also that the people that are employed by these modes, their well-being is also of interest to ports, and clearly, the fact that ship crews can be relieved from duty and be replaced by others is equally a priority, I would say, from our point of view. Their physical and mental well-being is really also for reasons of overall safety essential. Yeah, I would say from a port's point of view. And I think we're past the 5 to 12 situation. I think it's already 5 past 12. If you see that there was an incident in Port of Rotterdam a couple of days ago with a lethal case, somebody who jumped overboard from a cruise ship that was there for a few days. So it's getting really, really, really urgent, and that's why we were very happy to support the Guy's initiative in developing these protocols. The overall goal is to ensure, from our point of view, is that the on-signing and off-signing of crews, that these people have to spend as little time as possible in the port area, so that they don't, have the risk of getting, contamination or any contact risk. So I think that's also what the protocol says, the port chapters of the protocol. Next to the crew change, I think there is, of course, the general issue of safe interaction between ship and shore-based personnel. And we've noticed, I think, on both sides, we've noticed that this has been subject of friction and nervousness, sometimes based on perception, sometimes based on fact. And here again, we welcome very much the initiative of Guy and ICS next to the crew change protocols, to also work out a series of, very practical, risk-based measures to address concerns and expectations of people on board ships, but also people working in the ports, and they meet each other. And it's port workers, it's inspections, it's authorities, pilots. There are many interactions, and these guidelines are again a good example, I think, of how the industry has come together, and that's really, I think, a positive outcome, if you like, of this crisis. That we're an incredibly complex industry in many ways. So there are many stakeholders involved. If you look at the number of associations that join your weekly call, I think there's more than 25, all different angles of the industry. And on issues like crew change and ship-shore interface, we really found each other in working together. And I think that's really the way forward, also when we get out of the immediate sort of urgency of the crisis.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Heike, both Guy and Patrick alluded to it. Of course, the humanitarian dimension of this is increasingly urgent. We get heartbreaking reports of the strains that they're suffering mentally, physically, people dying, people committing suicide. So it's a humanitarian side to it. It's also a safety side to it, because people feeling trapped and tired, they are more susceptible to making operational errors, which can be harmful to themselves, their colleagues, or be fatal for accidents. So, what is your take on this? I understand that you have now that the IMO, such as your Secretary General, has endorsed the 12-step plan presented by the ICS, and it's now forwarded to the member states, the 174 member states of the IMO.
Yeah, that is correct, Sturla. We have issued wide variety of guidelines since the pandemic started. They address many kind of issues, not only crew change issues, they also address technical shipping issues like unforeseen delays in the delivery of ships that now causing problems with ships that are newly constructed, not complying with requirements, or certification issues. Surveys cannot be conducted because the surveyors cannot go on board ships. And in this series of circular letters, as we call them, that we have issued, we were very happy to endorse the ICS framework protocols for this 12-step plan for joining and leaving ships. We, as I said before, we are working very closely together with the shipping industry because that's the cold face of our business. So of course we need to have their input and work with them. And that's why we were very happy to issue this globally, because the tendency at the moment seems to be, instead of global action, we have unilateralism. And many IMO member states have taken actions separately, of course, to protect their country. That is understandable. The problem for us now is also one of which authority is in charge. In most countries, it's now the health authorities that have to say. Our contact partner has always been the Maritime Administration in the countries. They now take second place. The health people say what is going to happen. And of course, they are not always aware of all the issues that concern an industry like shipping. We have therefore worked also very closely with WHO, with the Health Organization, to have webinars internationally to actually present to the health authorities what problems their decisions cause for shipping and how it could be addressed. So yeah, we're really trying to address every angle in this big dilemma for shipping.
Yeah, I can confirm that from what I've seen. Both your organization and Patrick's and Guy's organization, they've done a massive amount of work on this. So that's very, very impressive. And now the hope and ambition and need actually is that this is now translated into political action. For that purpose also, we at the UN Global Compact, we established the COVID-19 task force and invited a select group of prominent representatives from all branches, all strands of the ocean-related industries to take part in this work. And all three of you were part of that work, and for that we are very, very grateful. Now, and all your organizations and associations have endorsed this set of recommendations, 14 actionable recommendations, which have been now submitted both to the UN Secretary General and to the President of the General Assembly of the UN. So that's the highest level that you can have in the international sphere. Now, in these recommendations, we had of those 14 recommendations, there were two sort of key recommendations. One is that there is an urgent need to establish a political, a global task force of governments, because this is not a challenge, not a problem which can be dealt with bilaterally or between a small group of countries for obvious reasons. The other is related to the designation of so-called key workers, essential personnel, to keep the supply chains moving, of which, of course, the seafarers, the crew aboard ships, are at the core of this. And it strikes me that this problem is so overlooked and underestimated in the public sphere and in the political discussion. It seems to be absent. And I think that, Guy, you said that in your introductory remark. This is sort of a case of out of sight, out of mind. The shipping industry, even though it's vital to everything in our modern societies and for provision of critical goods, it's a stealth industry. It's invisible. We don't see the ships, we don't see the crew. We tend to forget them. And this is very different from what it was before, because most of the cities or the big cities in the world, they are at the coast because of the sea lanes. And in the old days, you had seafarers and ships as part of the daily life of cities. Now you don't see them. We don't think of that. But that doesn't mean, but that makes the challenge even larger, I think, in getting the proper attention for this. So maybe we are following up this through the political means in the UN system at the top level. Maybe, I don't know, Guy, if you would say something about how you now are pursuing this in your political follow-up of the 12-step plan.
We're using just about every avenue we possibly can do to try and get you. You're right, this can be solved. This is a political problem which needs solving. We can solve the practicalities. We could practicalities, you know, whether it's the ports or the regulations to put in place or whatever it is. We can do all of that. But ultimately, it's a political decision to allow this to happen. So it's urging governments to take note of what we're doing. You know, trying to perhaps, you know, if we could get some sort of summit, high-level summit of politicians, senior politicians from around the world, to just talk about this issue, because it's solvable with goodwill. It's not an unsolvable problem. It's not going to cost them lots more money. This is something that we need to sort out as an industry. So, but we also need to raise awareness of what seafarers do, and all three of us here and there have been doing our very best to do just that, to away from the sea blindness, as it's sometimes known as, to raise the whole profile of what ships, what ports do for the global supply chain of everyone. We had on Labour Day, on the 1st of May, we had a Heroes at Sea shout out, where we asked all the ships in harbours around the world to sound their horns. In fact, ships even at sea were doing it, and we had an amazing reaction to that. And it was actually a bit of a boost for the seafarers as well, to great delight. But some of the noise in Singapore was overpowering, as it was in many other ports around the world. So I think it's our sort of tactics is to try and appeal to the top level politicians, try to highlight the examples of good practice, and I mentioned some chinks of light earlier, but also just to raise awareness of what shipping is all about and the vital role it plays in our lives.
I don't know if Patrick or Heike has something to add to this. Of course, at the IMO is an organization for governments. So it's your constituency are the governments.
That is correct, Sturla. We have 174 member states, 192 UN you have in the main UN, so we almost have all of them. Quite a few landlocked countries as well are member states of IMO. But what we are in UN terms is what is called a specialized agency. We are a technical agency, one of the smallest. Our remit is the technical regulation of shipping. What we lack a bit is what you have, and that is the direct access to the UN General Assembly, the bigger picture in the world. That's why the first two recommendations that you have agreed in your 14 recommendations to recognize the fundamental role of international ship supply chains or ocean-related supply chains, and especially the second, pursue holistic and harmonized global cooperation and coordination. And that's what is needed here. All the countries working in one direction and not everyone making his own little regulations that often conflict with each other. I was very happy to see this morning a Norwegian declaration, Sturla, exactly related to key workers, as you said. So Norway has recognized that seafarers are actually key workers. I mean, 200,000 people moving around the globe per month. Surely that needs to be recognized. And there are many countries have taken steps toward this direction, but we need much more international recognition of the problem. And to address it.
Yeah. So looking at the watch here and some time management of this conversation, I'd like now to turn to what after tomorrow. What will be sort of the post-pandemic world? What can we and how can we build back better to ensure improved resilience and better, of course, also treatment of our seafarers in this situation. Would you like to kick that off, Patrick?
Yes, thank you, Sturla. I think as I said in my introduction, this is also where we are now focusing our attention more and more on as a membership organization, and we had some of the first conversations yesterday, as I said, in a sort of an expert webinar, and for many people it's of course still early days to say what is going to happen after this crisis, but you do see some indications, and as I said, I heard a lot of optimism so far, which is good in a way. That one of the points made yesterday is how does this crisis compare with the last one, which was the financial and the economic crisis, which had a deep impact, I think, both on the shipping industry and on the ports industry. And I heard people say yesterday, and there was an economist, that we had Port of Los Angeles there as well, said, well, it's different that we're in a more controlled setting than we were maybe at the time of the financial crisis, when to some point everything was skyrocketing, the sky was the limit, double-digit growth, and nobody really saw it coming. There's a bit more control in this situation because lockdowns are of course introduced by governments and now gradually being relieved. The resilience of our part of the industry, as I said, also seems so far to hold rather well as a port sector. But maybe we still need to get the big hits coming and see how that affects. But the momentum is clearly there for embracing things that we were perhaps only half-heartedly embracing before, like digitalisation, and certainly the route towards a decarbonization, and that's really a plea that I would make. Both really connect to the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well, and that agenda is very valid. I think also in getting us out of this crisis. Data collaboration, for instance, it's something that will benefit multiple sustainable goals. If you look at the example of port call optimization, which is a way to make sure that ships can optimize their speed so that they arrive at their destination port when the berth is ready for them. So they don't have to wait, they don't have to spend time waiting, and therefore, they can cut costs, they can cut emissions, it's more efficient for the port operations, it's safer. This concept is not widespread today. And we know there are a number of reasons for it, contractual reasons, operational reasons, but maybe this is now a good momentum to take the next step. And the landscape is very heterogeneous. If you look at ports and the acceptance of digitalization, I think during the crisis that became clear. You have on the one hand of the spectrum, you have port communities that really seize the opportunity of new technologies and innovation and become what we call smart ports to the fullest extent. But many others have not even grasped the essentials, and they really rely a lot on personal interaction, paper-based transactions as the norm for ship-shore interface. Whilst we have already legal obligations under the IMO FAL Convention that we should have electronic interaction, but we know it's not happening yet, at least not everywhere. A good indicator, which I learned yesterday, I wasn't even aware of that, a port community system, that is sort of the IT platform which is considered to be the basis for electronic data exchange among stakeholders in ports. It's a relatively old concept already, but today, Heike, you mentioned there are 174 IMO member states. Only 49 of them have ports that have port community systems. So that's not even a third. I learned yesterday that in the United, and this is not just developed and developing countries. I learned yesterday that in the US, the Port of Los Angeles is the only port with a port community system. None of the other ports have that. So there's a lot of work to be done here, and maybe this is the moment where we can get together with governments, with the IMO, to sort of make a shopping list to say, okay, the IMO FAL requirements, standardization, data standardization. There's a number of other things on cybersecurity. Let's get this agenda out there, because it will also benefit other SDGs like decarbonization, safety, and you name it. So that would be sort of our priority if I look at it from the ports community on what we can do when we're getting out of the crisis into some sort of a new normal. I think that's really the key to many problems that we face.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. I think you're sort of confirming the old saying that the crisis, there are more forces in a crisis for changing things than in ambitions. So in this situation, maybe something good can come out of it. Heike, from the regulatory perspective, your reflection.
Yeah, I would echo many of the things that Patrick mentioned. The single window facilitation of shipping, the electronic interchange of data. This is, of course, one of the issues we are working at the moment, and also very closely with the port industry, of course. And there are other issues, and I can assure everyone that the greenhouse gas agenda is by no means now in the back of everyone's mind. On the contrary, the IMO Council has just agreed virtually for the first time and by correspondence, we have never worked this way before, a priority list for the issues that need to be considered earliest, and the greenhouse gas strategy is at the top of the agenda there. So the minute we can get back to physical meetings at IMO or even virtual meetings for a bigger audience, these will be Marine Environment Protection Committee of IMO will meet as a priority. Digitalization, automatization in shipping, of course, always on the agenda now. We also deal with autonomous ships. Of course, it has a direct impact on seafarers, again, in a completely different direction. Maybe that we won't need as many seafarers on board as we have now, and consequently, the problems might be less, but there will be other problems that will replace those. Yeah, the crisis has forced us to work in a completely different way. That goes even the way IMO is working, for instance. We now, the whole secretariat is working from home, and that is working out much better than everyone expected, actually. Virtual meetings are a possibility of cut down on travel we had so far because being a global business, we had a lot of mission travel involved for IMO staff. This will probably we will be able to cut down on this enormously. It's much easier now to work face-to-face using any of the softwares available. So the consequences of this crisis will definitely keep us busy for a long time. The effect on shipping, member states have already approached us to for the forthcoming meetings when we eventually start again to have agenda items on the COVID-19 fallout and how to address and prevent similar situations in the future.
Thank you, Heike. And then finally, you, Guy. What's beyond this?
Well, I think I don't want to add too much to what Heike and Patrick said, because I think they've really described some of the changes in the digitalisation and the fact, and Heike said, what we've learned this last few weeks is how well we've come together as an industry and we've solved problems which in normal times would have taken us many months, perhaps even years to resolve. We've done it in a very quick time, and there's a learning to be had from that. I think there's shipping is resilient. Shipping will still be here, but I do fear that one of the unintended consequences of this is going to be a rise in protectionism, which will affect world trade, and actually world trade, trading between nations, lifts people out of poverty. And I wouldn't want to lose sight of that as we move into that post-pandemic world. I also think, whilst we're in the middle of the crisis now, and some countries, as Patrick has said, have still got to experience even their peaks, we're going to be living with this COVID-19 it's not going to be over by September or October. It's going to be another couple of years where we're going to have to try and get to a new normal, and shipping will have to adapt to that, and regulations will have to adapt, whether that's more digital certification, we accelerate that, but minimizing those ship-shore interface as much as we possibly can, and learning to a new normal as we do business. So I think there's some things that we can learn that we put in place necessarily over the last few weeks, which actually, you know, and when we look back, we think, well, we can continue doing it that way. So I'm looking forward to that. The greenhouse gas reduction, Heike, I think this has shown me how fragile our ecosystem is. You know, the world was shut down in just a matter of weeks as a result of this. So I think it highlights the need to focus on the greenhouse gas reduction and the effect on shipping. And we'll continue that work at ICS now and work. I know a lot of work's still going on in the background for that, but I think it just highlights how we need to tackle these problems before they become a crisis. And I think that's another learning point from me with regards to all of this.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Guy. I've looked through some of the questions that have been curated by Michelle and Annalisa from New York. And as far as I can see, most of the questions have been answered. There's one question here: if there are governments showing leadership, and I think that's sort of the crucial question here. And I think that as a concluding remark, let me recall to you that the very word pandemic is derived from Greek. It means pan, all, and demic is from demos, people. So all people are affected. And when all people are affected, I think it's evident that all nations must cooperate. And there are no viable options to solve this in an efficient manner if nations are turning into themselves and turning their back to the global community. In this respect, no nation is an island, even on our blue planet. So political action, commitment, and coordination at the global level, and we need some governments to come forward and spearhead this effort. And it's urgently needed. And therefore, I would also, in conclusion, I would ask all of you, encourage all of you to bring this to the attention of your national governments, your local politicians, your media, and the public at large where you are. Because even though the seafarers are out of sight, they are vital to society, to the welfare and well-being of all of us. So in the meantime, I guess I'm speaking on behalf of everybody on this program. I'd like to extend our thoughts and gratitude to all those hundreds of thousands of seafarers, men and women, serving out there. I can assure you that we are doing our best to resolve this situation. Also, on a concluding note, I'd like to thank our panelists for sharing your time and your deep insights with us. I think this has been a very good conversation. Let me also remind people that tomorrow actually, we will be launching, the Ocean Action Platform will be launching an e-learning course on how companies can contribute to healthy and productive oceans. And also next week on Tuesday, we will have a UN Global Compact Academy call devoted to the challenges of climate change. So that will be all for now. Thank you so much for listening in. Take care and stay safe. Goodbye for now.